Welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Rosalyn Story, and I'll be your host as we celebrate the 2020 winners of the Hurston Wright Foundation Legacy Awards from the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation. The foundation has served as a forum for Black literary talent and a springboard for many major literary careers since its inception in 1990 in Washington, D.C. I might add that our own Sandria Faye Smith is a recent winner in the field of debut fiction for her book, Mourner's Bench. The awards are held annually and are given to authors of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and also spotlights college writers, essayists, and first-time novelists. This is the first year it has awarded a crossover award for literary nonfiction. So without further delay, I want to welcome our panel. We have 5 of the winners in the 2020 competition. Our panel of very, very talented writers, Jeffrey Colvin, Ladan Osman, Melanie Farmer, Sadia Hassan, and Sakinah Hofler. I don't know if Ladan is here yet. There she is. After each introduction, each writer will read a small section from their winning works. With remaining time, there may be a brief Q&A, and I will probably ask them 1 or 2 questions if we have time. I should tell you that this session will actually end at 3:50 to allow for the next panel to arrive and get in place. So Jeffrey Colvin, we will start with you. Jeffrey Colvin is the winner in the category of debut fiction for his novel, Africaville. His novel also won a 2020 Honor Fiction Prize by the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. It has been featured in Publishers Weekly, on NPR, in the Boston Globe, the BBC, the CBC, the Globe and Mail, and elsewhere. A graduate of the US Naval Academy and Columbia University, where he was awarded an MFA, Jeffrey is an assistant editor for Narrative Magazine and was recently named the Hodgson Trust John Carter Brown Fellow at Brown University. Inspired by Africaville, a neighborhood in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Colvin's intriguing and memorable debut shines a light on a little-known Black experience: the freed slaves from the Caribbean and US who established a community in Canada in the 1800s. Jeffrey, welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosalyn, and also thank you to Sadia and to the staff at the Dallas Literary Festival, and of course to Hurston Wright. And I'm so glad to be honored to be reading with all of my other panelists today. So I look forward to hearing from the other readers as well. As Rosalyn mentioned, my novel is about a small Black community that once existed on the edge of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I began writing the novel about 20 years ago, when I was writing a series of stories set in the small rural towns between Montgomery, Alabama, and Selma, along the route that they took during the 1960s Selma to Montgomery Voters' March. And so I thought, some of these towns are no longer there anymore. My grandmother raised her family in rural Alabama. And now that these towns are no longer there, I began writing these stories about these Alabama towns, and I read about Africaville, this town in Nova Scotia. And so I began to do research about how this town came together, and out of that became this novel. So I'm going to read the very opening of the novel. The first chapter is called Dog Trot Fever. Nova Scotia, 1918. Newborns are never afflicted with the malady. The swollen tongue, the reddish throat, the raw cough seem to afflict only babies older than 6 months. By the spring, in the village situated on a small knuckle-shaped peninsula just north of Halifax, all 5 of the stricken babies have now developed a high fever. Having no luck with sweet milk and lemon bitter, worried mothers administer castor oil mixed with camphor, then a tea of beer's root steeped with beech ash and clover. When desperate, they even place a few charms under the mattresses of the beds where the stricken babies lie crying. Nothing works. In mid-April, with 3 more babies now suffering from the malady, health department officials visit the village, their faces frozen even before they examined a single new case. Why our children? Several mothers standing in the yard of one house wants to know. Hadn't Halifax already given enough babies in the fire that leveled 10 square blocks of the city months before, when the munitions ship exploded out in the harbor? But then again, those had been white babies. No colored babies had died during that explosion. Was it now Woods Bluff's turn to lose infants? And if so, how many? 5, 10, all 22? The following week, after 2 of the feverish babies died, the mothers turned to the grandmothers, though many are leery of this option. Already, several grandmothers have suggested that since the home remedies haven't worked, and since neither nurse nor doctor has useful medicines, the afflicted infants must be bad luck babies. It is an expression the mothers haven't heard since they were children, though the fear of having a bad luck baby had terrorized mothers on the bluff as far back as 1790. That was the year the first groups of cabins sprang up across the bluff, displacing the fox, hare, and moose that ran through the thick Christmas ferns and sheep laurel. Back then, when no medicine could invigorate a baby whose body had begun to show the outlines of bones, smothering was sometimes recommended. Take no action, and bad luck might infect the entire village. Yet mothers are unconvinced that the deceased infants are bad luck babies. And even if the now suffering babies are saddled with bad luck, who's to say those old tales of smothering are true? Had anyone actually seen a mother place a blanket or pillow over a child's face? And more important, for these new cases, by what evidence will we make the diagnosis? The grandmothers had ready answers. For several descendants of the Virginian who came up to Nova Scotia in 1772 as a messenger in the British Army, a feverish baby had to be put to sleep if its father had recently had a limb severed above the knee or elbow. Death was also imminent if the baby's fever came during the same month as the mother's birthday. For the granddaughter of the Congolese woman who in 1785, dressed as a man, sailed into Halifax harbor on a ship out of Lisbon, a feverish baby had to be smothered if the newborn was smaller than a man's hand. And for the largest group of grandmothers, those descended from the nearly 200 Jamaicans who landed in Halifax harbor in 1788 after being expelled by British soldiers from their island villages, fomenting rebellion, a feverish baby's fate was sealed if the child coughed up blood during the same month a traveling man arrived on your stoop selling quill turpentine, goat leather, or gunpowder. Hadn't such a vendor made the rounds in Woods Bluff the month before? Why continue to nurse such a child? Death already had a square toe on the baby's throat. It was only a matter of days, a week maybe if the baby were a girl. Thank you.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for that amazing story. And thank you for bringing those little known stories to light. We're going to go on next to Ladan Osman. Born in Mogadishu, Somalia, Ladan Osman grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and received an MFA at the University of Texas at Austin. A teacher and poet, Osman is the winner of the Hurston Wright Award for Poetry for her book, Exiles of Eden. She is also the author of The Kitchen Dweller's Testimony, winner of the Sillerman First Book Prize, and the chapbook Ordinary Heaven, which appears in the box set of 7 new generation African poets. Here's what Publishers Weekly says of Exiles of Eden. Contesting the idealism of Eden while summoning Eve as her muse, Osman dissects displacement, most notably as a woman and a Somali American. She addresses ancestral sorrow, privilege, and self-neglect, as well as a feeling of waning hope. Exiles of Eden offers a generous rooted and humbly adamant quest for agency. And thank you for joining us. Ladan, please begin.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to read at this festival and on behalf of the Hurston Wright Foundation, and of course, along with all of you. So I'll just read one poem, and I read this for everyone that has to walk for their freedom and walk toward a better story. Introduction through parables, Marwa. I was named after a well, my sister too. After holy wells distant from each other, we are distant from each other. Our mother didn't intend it. War is the frantic wet nurse running between us. We are both thirsty. We are all thirsty. There is no divine child to make our waters holy. Our waters heal no affliction. Who would supplicate at our bases, seek our waters? In parables, girls are never divine, only their mothers. But like Abraham, I ask God to show himself. I ask in the plains. I ask in the desert. He answers me with light. He answers me with metal. Tea with an iron flavor. We sell it town to town, migrants in our own wild bush. Gunmetal sweat, weapon oil in the life and luck lines of my palm. We traverse the land. We move with shadow. We are guided by water. I ask God to show himself. A prophet courted birds and waited for God. Yet another was given a hoopoe that spoke. Some have warbirds, they too look. They too make reports. We live in a time machines have emissaries, but like Abraham, it's not possible to destroy me. They try by fire and by sand. They try by metal and by verse. Still I traverse my land without a sister, with no family, not even a man who no longer accepts a hand on his chest when frantic. Myself, strange women, strange girls traverse in this parable, men and boys attain godhood. They send war to run hill to hill, well to well. War runs so fast she loses her shoe. There is no holy child. War ran with empty arms and empty shawl. When men and their boys come to a frenzy, they can't submit to anything. No thing is a kindness. Nothing is a kindness. Don't touch me. Don't look at me. With their whole persons, no one supplicates to frantic gods. Their command has no end. It can never become story. It could never become ritual. Thank you so much.
Ladan, thank you so much for that wonderfully rich and evocative reading. We're going to go on now to Melanie Farmer. Melanie Farmer is the Hurston Wright winner of the Crossover Award for Literary Nonfiction. Melanie is a Central Florida-based writer and educator who holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Central Florida. She is a winner of a 2019 Intro Journals Award from the Association of Writers and Writing Programs, and is the winner of the Hurston Wright's first Crossover Award in Literary Nonfiction. Her work can be found in the Tampa Review and Split Lip magazine. Her winning essay is titled Rolling, A Lady's Guide to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The competition was judged by Pulitzer Prize winning novelist Colson Whitehead. In selecting Farmer's piece, Whitehead said, Rolling, a Lady's Guide to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a wise and wry take on identity formation, parental expectations, and proper martial arts attire. Following a young woman's journey from student to teacher, this thoughtful essay's nimble voice provides a lively exploration of family bonds and the search for self-mastery. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. So thank you to Hurston Wright. Thank you to everybody at this festival and to the city of Dallas. I used to live there, so hi, Dallas. So yeah, I'm going to read a little bit from the essay. And every time I've ever read this essay, I've started at the beginning. So I'm going to start in the middle. So since I'm starting in the middle, let me give you just like a heads up. So the essay is in sections. It reads like a guidebook. So there's a header, and then there's like a little like tip section, and then it goes into the next part. I'm reading several sections, but they should be self-explanatory. But I am starting in the middle. All right, here we go. Your Mother, Part 2, Skinniness. As a female human in America, one of the greatest things you can be is skinny. You might also think there's some value in being kind or smart, but really, if you want to get anywhere in life, you should put some thought and action into the whole being skinny thing. It unlocks a lot of doors. Your mother, a woman who'd never tipped the scale at 100 pounds the day she was married, knows this well. When you were little, your mother used to call you pleasingly plump, which you mistakenly took for a compliment because you only understood that she was saying, and you thought that she was saying, pleasing me plum, which sounded all around great. That's not what she was saying. If your mother is the kind of woman who wears dresses and makeup and always remembers to curl her hair, it is likely that she spent a significant amount of time, skill, and dedication making sure that you were clean, dressed, braided, decorated, dusted off, polished, and repolished regularly from birth until whatever age it is that you managed to break free from all of that junk. For that reason, you're likely a bit of a disappointment to her. Embrace this. It will become the source of your power. Still, in this whole martial arts endeavor, it's important to find a middle ground where you and your mother can mutually acknowledge this significant part of your life. So, while it may not be interesting to you, stick with the skinny thing. Make sure she knows that jujitsu is why it happened. Make no deeper mentions of the sport than that. Beauty, force, and energy. When played properly, the game of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a combination of these three things. It will take you a long time to figure that out. It will take you forever to master it. If you move when your opponent moves, the game goes more smoothly. It looks more beautiful, is more correct, is more interesting to watch. As a beginner, it's hard to accomplish this. When you start out, you exert too much energy. You push too much, breathe too shallowly, move too quickly. You apply more force than is necessary. You gas out. You get exhausted. But as you start to learn the game, you realize that it's about placement and leverage, timing and strategy. You start to see that you shouldn't move forward until you know where you are headed. You learn that you must let go of one grip if you're to establish another one, and that the most well-planned submission might fail. And the only way to handle that failure is to move on to something new. But you cannot move on if you don't first let go. Jiu-Jitsu is a game designed for the smaller player to win. When you see an opponent who is much larger than you, it is hardly a sure sign that you will lose. Yes, in the match, there will be two bodies imposing force on one another, but there will also be spaces, little holes that exist behind arms and beneath torsos if you know where to look for them. When explaining the dynamics, your coaches will tell you that it's easier to move around the mountain than to lift it. You will remember this. Your Mother, Part 3, Dating. Your mother would have an opinion about this no matter what. But since you're now a martial artist, there will be increased concern and urgency in this particular area. Your femininity is important to her and likely at risk based on your hobbies. She will seek to intervene before too much has been lost that cannot be regained. Attractiveness will be important. When you're not at the gym, she will stress the importance of wearing skirts and makeup, possibly even going so far as to buy these items for you to assure that you have enough in supply to properly assert your femaleness. She will also encourage you to develop at least a passing interest in a real mainstream American sport, like football, despite your expressed distaste for it. She'll put it like this. Everyone likes football, and you'll say, I don't. And she'll say, you just need to try harder. Don't you want me to explain it to you? And you'll say, nope. And she'll say, well, you're never going to get a boyfriend if you can't at least talk about football. And you'll say, not everybody likes football. And she'll say, they do. You don't. If she bothered to know anything about the sport that you are participating in, it would likely concern her on many levels. All that time spent straddling men's chests and squeezing their necks between your thighs, holding men down and choking them with your biceps is hardly the ladylike behavior she seeks to engender in you. Luckily, her dim comprehension of what you actually do does not come close to this level of detail. When she asks you, what's jujitsu, you've taken to saying it's in the Olympics, even though it's not. as a way of verifying its legitimacy as a sport and guaranteeing that she will both neither figure out what actually entails or do any further questioning. The execution of this brilliant one-line shutdown is a sign of your increasing ability to move around the mountain. The less she knows about what you're up to, the less you'll have to explain. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Melanie, thank you so much. As I was listening to you, I couldn't help but think of 100 life metaphors that relate to what I'm sure you had that in mind too. I don't think it was any accident. There are many relatable things in those exercises. We're going to move on now to Sadia Hassan. Sadia Hassan is a Somali American essayist and poet and is an MFA candidate at the University of Mississippi. She is the winner of Hurston Wright's Award for College Writers in Poetry. Her chapbook, Enumeration, appears in the New Generation African Poets, a chapbook set. You can find more of her work in the Rumpus, the Boston Review, and elsewhere. The 3 poems included in Black Girl Prayer Poems were separate attempts at making sense of loss. I'm sorry, I should have prefaced this. This is what Sadia has said of her writing. So the 3 poems in Black Girl Prayer Poems were separate attempts in making sense of loss. In one, a chorus of girls demands a kind of justice. In another, a young woman reflects on what it means to wake up one day having survived what she once had no language for. And in the last, a speaker elegizes about autumn. And I love what you said about what precipitated these particular poems. She said, when I submitted these poems, I had just moved from across the country and the move unsettled something in me. I missed home, I missed friends, I missed the ocean. But I was also met with so much that served as a continuum into past lives. I found that the trees and chatter of birds and insects felt exactly in Mississippi as they had in other moments in my life, which meant that I could go trail running, bird watching, and listen for bullfrogs without being afraid. I had been here before. I submitted a suite of poems in which each speaker's voice is strengthened by the other, where each considers the contours of personal tragedy without being lonely in their experience. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you to the Hurston Wright Foundation, who's always just incredibly supportive of their writers. Thank you to Audrey, who's in the audience, and to Sandria and Rosalyn today. And to the wonderful readers, all the Hurston Wright Foundation winners. So I'll be reading A Boy Was Killed in Clarkston after Gwendolyn Brooks. A boy was killed in Clarkston, and I heard it up the block in Oakland. His face, the same face I held to the couch. He and my brother having stolen ice cream money from the cushion for calling cards. All the internet will tell me, I already know. Yes, his parents fled a coup, same as mine fled the war. And he played for the Fugees, and he cried during Oprah, and he cried during leg lifts and sit-ups, and especially when they called him Fat Boy. What they won't tell me is that he died at all, that a boy was killed in Clarkston, that I had walked to school once, that a boy died, a boy from Clarkston. And now my parents are nursing the news of a gun. I keep asking the internet, but did he die though? Is he dead? And I keep asking the internet how, or at least can you tell me what to do with all the unknowing years between us, suckling this dry bone? My therapist says there's only the now, but there's also the now of when my mother last saw him in the plaza, all 6 feet of him doubling over for a hug. And she said she felt his familiar weight, his face fat in her hands, smile sweet as cream. And the men, shamed at the tenderness between them, walked back into their shops at the sight. If it's okay, I'd also like to read a catalog of praise. A catalog of praise. Praise the coffee shop 1 block up from the crib And praise the Black barista in purple with a newborn and up at 7 making white folks coffee. Praise her sister's bald head shining and liner cut crisper than a mug. And praise the laugh skipping like a record. And the mug chipped from the weak shelf of the startup that stole my 2 good years. And praise those 2 good years, however they found me, sweet or unsweet. And praise my daddy for calling me sweetness. And praise my daddy for pilfering sugar. And praise my daddy for refusing silence. And praise my daddy for edging my mother towards a gentle hello. And good on her for trusting I would return to the table and rise from the bed. Praise the bed. And these days the table, set with tea and the one succulent I almost killed, leaning long tongue towards me and not the sun. And praise the viridescent and decaying heavy. Praise the air between these lungs and the funk between these pits. Praise my name, Ya Allah. Praise my lips, hips, and eye sockets for beholding another day. Praise the days for keeping on coming. Praise the good earth and the night terrors and the wonders of a small cup of coffee and 1 chocolate croissant. Thank you.
Sadia, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that powerful and intimate and provocative reading. We're going to go to our last reader now, our last winner, and I will remind you that if you have a question, please put it in the chat part of at the bottom of your screen that says chat there. You can write a question, and at the end of these 5 readings, I'm going to start the ball rolling with a question of my own that kind of intrigues me for all the panelists to answer. And we're going to go on now to Sakinah Hofler. She is the winner of the Hurston Wright Award for College Writers of Fiction for her story. Sakinah is a poet and playwright. Her work has appeared in Kenyon Review Online, Hayden's Ferry Review, Mid-America Review, and elsewhere. She has also won the Manchester Fiction Prize and the Sherwood Anderson Fiction Award. A former engineer for the U.S. Department of Defense and hailing from Newark, New Jersey, she's currently a doctoral candidate and a Yates Fellow at the University of Cincinnati. Her story is titled The Gifts We Don't Need. Novelist Naima Koster, author of Halsey Street, judged the fiction competition. In selecting Hofler's story, Koster said, "The Gifts We Don't Need is a complex and sensitive exploration of family secrets, sisterhood, and silence. The story renders the interior life of a girl living through a summer that will alter her family forever. The narrative voice is fierce and the events wholly memorable, a powerful, propulsive story." And Sakinah, please begin.
Thank you so much, Rosalyn. And also thank you, Sandria, for setting us up, and Hurston Wright for being wonderful cheerleaders. And I'm really honored to read alongside all the writers today. So I'm just going to read the first part of The Gifts We Don't Need. The summer I turned 17, my father returned from Egypt with Yasmin, your sister. Those words hovered above our heads and stalked us like some lonely jinn. Before he left, Umi said things like, "Of course Yasmin is welcome in our home, and of course Yasmin should get to know her sisters." But after he left to teach a 3-week intensive course on the diaspora and pick up Yasmin, Umi dropped all the familiar talk, and the most we got out of her was, "That girl." "Layla, that girl's gonna share a room with you. Can you clear out your bottom drawer so she has some place to put her clothes? It's not really a whole month. That girl will be with us for a week, and then we'll go camping in the Poconos, and then she's off to your grandmother's. That's not too bad, right? Can that girl even speak English? Should we buy deodorant for that girl? Lotion, hand sanitizer? What do you two think she needs? I need your love to be good to that girl. Can you do that for me?" We had no answers to her endless questions. Khadijah and I solemnly watched as our lives were reordered and rearranged. My winter clothing stuffed into Chinese laundry bags and stored at the back of the attic. My second dresser moved into Khadijah's room. The futon carried from the basement to my room. Umi barked orders at men she had picked up from the gas station around the corner. Men who spoke clip Spanish while they handled our furniture and grinned at Khadija and me as if they, too, already knew what was going to happen. My mother and my sister and I had only been to Egypt once. I have snippets of memory fostered by photographs, snapshots from our throwaway cameras of rickshaws, donkeys, half-finished apartment buildings, families picnicking at 2 a.m. In one picture, Khadija sits on a camel, her mouth frozen in forever scream. I stand next to her, crying. My father stands on the other side of the camel, his mouth stretched into a toothy grin. Perhaps, even then, we were aware our father had fallen in love with Egypt. In the States, we lived near New York, a city smaller than Cairo, more modern but not as beautiful. My father, a professor of African American and African Studies at Rutgers Newark, applied for and received a grant to do research the following year. He returned the next fall, fluent in Egyptian Arabic. We parked ourselves on a couch, snacked on buttery Gorayeba cookies, and listened to his tales and adventures. When he mentioned the juiciest kufta he'd ever had and a new wife and Osman in the same sentence, I didn't get it. My mother began rapidly blinking, then crying. She demanded a kula. My father seemed hurt and asked her how could she impose a permanent divorce on their 2 children. I remember 2 months of restrained sobs, blank stares at the wall, late night istikhara prayers where she begged Allah what to do. The distracted congratulations she gave me when I brought home nearly straight A's, then being asked a week later if we'd received our report cards yet. My father walked around reading Quranic verses about his rights. When my mother told him she would go through with the kula, he brought home tea roses, pendants, bangles from the gold shop in Patterson, a cruise to Barbados. Within a year, he had divorced that woman. Though that woman later remarried, he returned to Aswan every summer to visit the daughter that Deliant had produced. Since we weren't allowed to hang photographs on the walls, and he used his office phone to make the long-distance phone calls, we had eased into pretending they didn't exist. Occasionally, my mother would pick us up from school and glare at the Alis, a large family of cousins upon cousins whose roots were in Cairo, and search their faces as if they knew something. I spent a lot of time watching reruns of The Cosby Show, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Family Matters. Everyone makes mistakes, my father often said. On those shows, it seemed like everyone cried and laughed and fixed stares in a half hour. It took a couple of years for all of us, especially my mother, to learn how to laugh again. Okay, and I'll stop there.
Well, Sakinah, that was wonderful and just a marvelous reading. Thank you for your powerful and very personal words. And I think we're going to end, this is the end of our 5 here, 5 readings. And I think we're going to now go to, I have a couple of questions that I have in mind. If anybody else has, I'm seeing the chat seems to have a couple of questions in them, and we'll get to those. However, okay, let's see if I get back to my page here. Okay, so yeah, as I'm listening to all of you, I'm hearing an incredible range of stories of power, of intimacy, of pain, loss, transition, humor, just a whole range of human emotions and conditions. And as I look at the 5 of you who are brilliant writers, I'm amazed at the variety. We have a range of voices, of genres, backgrounds, and of course, points of view. So I'm curious, and this is the question I'd like for all of you to answer: how does your own personal story intersect with the pieces that you've written and the stories that you tell in general as a writer? And I think if you don't mind all answering, start with you, Jeffrey, if you have any ideas about that. I'll be happy to read again too.
Well, thank you. Yes, that was, thanks to all the readers. It was wonderful. I would say that one of the questions I'm often asked, this reminds me of a question I'm asked a lot as well. How did a man from Alabama come to write a novel about Canada? And for me, the answer is that while I was working on these stories set in these rural communities in Alabama, I was also having conversations with my grandmother, who had raised a family in a small community in Alabama. And by the time I went off to college, the community was gone. You know, people had moved out and moved other places. Most of her children had either immigrated north or moved to other parts of Alabama. and everyone else in the community had moved out. And then I read an article in the New York Times about this village in Halifax that had been destroyed in the 1960s. It had been in the news in the 60s when, over the objection of the residents, the city of Halifax went in, forced everybody out of their homes and tore down all the houses. And I'd watched the BBC, I think it was a video about the village. And I was hearing these stories from the people who lived in this town, and they sounded very similar to the stories that my grandmother's neighbors had told about her town. And so I felt an instant connection to the people up in Halifax. And so I just began to do research, and I thought, well, this story about this village in Halifax could be the source of a novel. And so that's sort of how the personal connection was there. I felt an immediate connection between the life I grew up in and the rural life in Alabama to this town in Halifax. It may have been miles away, but the connection was there.
And Jeffrey, have you been to Halifax?
Yes, I went up, I made a number of visits to Halifax. And as a matter of fact, I interviewed I wanted to walk the land, get a sense of the sights, sounds, smells. The houses are no longer there, but you can sort of see the land and sort of, smell the water and the sea and all of that. And so I went up and did that. I also did some interviews, and the woman on the cover of the book, this woman here on the cover of the book is still living. She was 16 at the time this picture was taken, before Halifax was destroyed. So I interviewed her, and she's very nice. And I go back, last year, 3 years ago, I guess it was, they have an annual picnic. And so they invited me up for that. And so that was very nice to talk to people there too. So I do go back often.
Would anybody like to answer the question next, or shall I just call on you? Like they do in school. Sakinah, you have a nice smile on your face. I'm going to call on you.
Okay, no, that's fine. This actually was one of the, a lot of the fiction I write is actually speculative fiction, or futuristic, kind of like Black Mirror-esque. And this is like one of the first ones where I really wanted to write about my hometown and how I grew up in a Muslim community. And despite the great aspects of it having a community, there were some wild things that went on. And I always remember one summer my father's best friend went to Egypt and then came back, and he had a wife and kids here, and he just came back with a wife, and his wife did permanently divorce him, which means that once you're permanently divorced, you can never get remarried ever again in Islam, called a kula. But that was when I was maybe 10, and so fast forward a couple of decades, and I started actually writing. I was like, man, that's crazy. You just went over to a different country and picked up you basically just had an affair, except for it's allowed in Islam. So you went on it. He had a year in Egypt, and he went and did his thing. But then I started wondering well, what happened, just kind of imagining what happens if someone did that and they had a kid, and the kid had to come back over, and now you have this complicated family situation. But I really wanted to just kind of write about the Muslim community that I grew up in, and some good aspects and some bad aspects, and also just to write about the Black people I grew up around in Newark. I'm very proud of my city, and I don't know, just really proud of how I grew up. I don't know how to explain it, but without in Newark, kind of grew up without the white gaze, if that makes any sense. And so I wanted to write a story that kind of explored just Black people doing messed up things but minus the white gaze. And that's one of the stories that it kind of allowed me to do that. And so I had a lot of fun writing it, and also was inspired by my sister and our relationship, because I love her so much. So.
Great. Okay, well, great. Moving right along, how about hearing from you, Melanie?
Okay, so I feel like I'm cheating, answering a question about what's personal. I mean, I write personal essays. They're about me usually. They're also occasionally about other people who did not ask to be put in them, like my mother in this particular case. So I think that obviously my life and my personal experience is sort of infused throughout them. And in a lot of cases, what I'm most worried about when I'm writing is how do I zoom it or turn it out to have something to do with the world around me. So I guess I'm sort of working backwards in that way. Because I think that the personal essay as a place to divulge things or admit stuff, secrets, and to reflect on yourself, you know, like there's this line between like, is this for me or is this for the rest of the world? And I think that like the trick in telling a story about yourself is to figure out like, what about the rest of the world? And like a lot of scrutiny goes into that aspect of it. So I think that I guess on my end, I'm obviously writing about myself, but trying to write about other people by doing that. Yeah.
So I do have one question for you, Melanie. So I know nothing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, didn't even know that it existed. And so why? What was it about that led you to becoming, I assume you're a practitioner of
Yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu. And so what happened?
So Jiu-Jitsu came into my life at kind of a weird time. I had been laid off and I had been practicing Jiu-Jitsu before I was laid off, but then after I was laid off, I had all this time and I really like dove in head first to the point where like I was training at a level that was like completely absurd and unnecessary, but like it was taking up my time. And for those of you who don't know the sport, like Jiu-Jitsu is it's ground fighting, so it's a little bit like wrestling, but it's much more slow in pace. So it's not like a high speed, like agitated kind of a sport. It's actually very measured. And like a lot of times people compare it to chess. So I think that for me, I was at like a place where I was very like stuck and like trying to figure out what to do with myself. And then I started doing this thing that was all about like being methodical. And that, I mean, you kind of hear that in the essay a little bit. But I think that like people who practice jujitsu tend to be really immersed in it. It's very community minded. It's very social. You know, you're really connected to like a team of people, even though it's an individual sport. And like I said, it's one of these sports that people always tend to see like some kind of metaphorical connection to what's going on in their lives, you know, and it kind of has these rise and fall in the way that the events of life do, you know, like sometimes you're on, sometimes you're off, sometimes you're, you know, you're trying to do something, but it's not sticking. And so for me, I think that like it was like the perfect sport for my level of nerdiness and also like where I was emotionally. And it became very engrossing because of that. And I often find myself writing about it, not just this essay, like other things, like it just seeps in a lot of the time.
Thank you, Melanie.
Yeah.
We'll go on to Ladan. And I apologize. I know that I'm butchering your name. It's a beautiful name.
Oh, thank you so much. That's actually super close.
Okay.
It's pronounced Ladan.
Ladan.
I think the thing that I was thinking about the most and was just how quickly the planet was changing and how disturbing and disruptive that was, like how the earth carries so much and has given us so much, and there are all these corporations that are super reckless about that. And so the relationship to modernity, but also, yeah, how to make sure to involve the creatures and the atmosphere and different things that are going on, because also so much of human conflict and human heartache, you know, has to do with climate change and has to do with environmental racism. It has to do with all the ways that different kinds of people are pursued everywhere. And so I think there are some things that are kind of disguised as love poems, like they look like love poems that have to do with, you know, maybe something happening day to day or one specific relationship. But yeah, I think most of the time I was just thinking of that as like, what does it mean to be lonely in this modern time? Which is strange given the time that we're in now and have been for the past year. But also, yeah, what does it mean to be experiencing that fracture while we're in this place and contained in this place and have a responsibility to this place, and how that's reflected in our relationship to the government, to oppressive systems, to relationships, both nurturing and not nurturing. And so those are the different things that I was just trying to be in conversation with when I was writing Exiles.
I relate to that. I do wonder when I think about all of you young writers, how people who are beginning creative writing projects during this time, during the problems of race and politics and climate change and you name it, and what if you need time to reflect on that, or if you just want to jump in and be in the moment with that, and how you would feel a year from now about these projects. But, yeah. So we'll go on now. I think we just have a few minutes left. So Sadia, what are your thoughts?
I mean, my thoughts are that I'm thankful that like every story has already been told, and that like I can try and find kinship with, you know, people like Gwendolyn Brooks, right, who wrote A Boy is Killed in Brooklyn, I think, and who, yeah, I look to where we already have rituals to celebrate both, like to grieve and also to like praise the mundane things that happen in our life, right? So I try and start my stories and my poems there about like just what brings me back to myself in the everyday, and beginning from there, and just trying to keep an eye towards like awe and wonder, even as I'm holding like some really tough things.
Yes, I love Gwendolyn Brooks, and I was very caught when I saw that in your bio. I thought, oh, wow, she's young to be a fan of the great Gwendolyn Brooks. Got a chance to meet her when I was in college. But the poem that you referenced, A Boy Was Killed in Brooklyn, there's another one, The Ballad of Emmett Till. Is that a separate poem of hers, or is that part of the same? Do you know that poem?
I think it may be separate. I think it may be separate only in that I remember when I came to A Boy Is Killed in Clarkston, it was a poem about police violence. Right. It might feed into that part. I'm not sure. I have an imagistic memory, and that's what I remember from the poem on the page is the speaker looking out of the window and seeing a cop murdering a young boy, and the speaker holding that elegy firm.
Yes, and it seems that Gwendolyn Brooks was writing about a time that is very similar to what we're experiencing now. Everything goes in cycles, and here we are again. Anyway, but listen, I think we're going to have to close. Unfortunately, it's about 11 minutes till we have to wait. We have to depart so that another group can come in. But thank you all so much. I see Sandra is back with us now. Hi. Sandra, are we good on time?
No, we're right now. But I just wanted, Rosalyn, that was beautiful. Thank you all. Hurston, Wright, it warms my heart that you all were able to participate in the panel. Congratulations on winning the award. It changed my life. I hope it does the same for yours. And thank you for being here again. This is the Dallas Literary Festival presented by Southern Methodist University. So I'd like to give a huge shout out to Southern Methodist University for their vision. And go on over to dallasliteraryfestival.org and purchase these wonderful books from our independent bookstores. The next thing is that we have 2 other events. We have 4 more events, I think, maybe 6 today. And the next one is one that I'm looking forward to is former athlete that's now an author and filmmaker, and also new fiction from Strange Objects. And it is a PEN America partner with us to bring about this event. So please join us, don't leave, stay, get a drink. I got mine, and we'll see you. Hopefully I'll see you guys again soon. Thank you very much for being here.